The Singer Manufacturing Company, the sewing machine makers of the world. After making and selling over 9 million machines, have just brought out 3 wonderful new light-running silent sewing machines: oscillator, vibrator, automatic, especially adapted for family use. In elegant, convenient, and artistic cabinet work, with our new patented stand, and all the latest attachments and modern improvements. The Singer Manufacturing Company, 4th Avenue and 16th Street, New York. Directly represented in every city in the world. October 5th through November 12th, 1883. All right, it's time I finally said it. I'm tired of chasing these stars all over tarnation. I want to eat a hot meal, take a hot bath, and sleep in a warm bed. Most of all, I want to head back to Frisco and marry Lily Clara. I want our life together to begin. She is the good life I've been dreaming about since I decided to leave the Pinkertons. And now I want to stop dreaming and start living. I just passed through Moab, and a miner I had a meal with gave me a description of the stars as a trio of beauties who crossed his path last week. How in the world these ladies get so far ahead beats me. They always seem to be 2 steps ahead of my every move. I've never encountered the likes of them in all my days as a ranger or a Pinkerton. The closest I've come to meeting these same wily ways in a female was when I first met Lizzie. She practically tricked Bill into giving her a chance as a Pinkerton. Not that he needed to be tricked. Bill was always looking for unlikely characters to recruit because they made the best agents. On my way out of Moab, I came across several drawings like these. They say the Anasazi used to farm in this part of the territory. Wasn't too long after that I came across remnants of their pueblos, which were real interesting to look at. Been too poorly to record anything I've seen for several days now. I had me a tumble down a cliff and took a spill into the Colorado. Thanks to Orion, who pulled my sorry carcass out of the river before drowning, I'm here to tell you the tale. A Mr. Lafayette Peterson found me washed up on the banks of the fork that leads to the San Rafael River. I woke up to him holding my banged-up head in his hands, muttering some sort of prayer over me. He's a Mormon bishop from Spring City. I've been quite addled since he found me. I didn't tell my Lily just how addled I was, because I didn't want her to know just how close I came to never seeing her walk down the aisle. Lafayette, however, couldn't help seeing I was in a mighty bad way, and was kind enough to take me home with him. I've been staying at the Peterson residence while a mighty fine lady by the name of Fanny Crawford has been looking after me. She lives in a tiny stone cottage right on Main Street here in Spring City. She has something of the healer's touch about her. Like the stars, she knows her plants and home remedies, but seems to have something extra as well. I don't know if it's all the praying she does, but after a week under her care, I almost feel right as rain. When I tried to pay for her nursing me, however, she wouldn't hear of it. Just told me she was doing the work of the Almighty, and that was payment enough for her. This has been my first real chance to observe Mormonism up close, like this. In some ways, it's a mighty peculiar religion. In others, it's not much different than my own. As much as I like Lafayette Peterson and all his wives, I've rescued far too many women mistreated by scoundrels in my line of work to ever condone something like having more than one wife. However, I am pleased to say that, at least from what I've seen here in Spring City, these Mormon fellas actually love and respect their wives, and they take good care of them and their vast offspring, too. Of course, there are exceptions to every rule, but I don't mind saying I've made a fair few friends during my stay here. I do believe I'll miss Spring City. November 12th, 1884. Dear Lily Clara, well, Lily darling, you don't mind if I call you darling now that we're engaged, do you? If I were there courting you in person, I'd take you out on one of those evening strolls Pearson has been taking your sister on. Rather than wasting our time together trying to solve a crime, though, I'd use it to steal a kiss or two. Maybe I'd even convince you to engage in some good old-fashioned sparklin' in the dark behind one of those tombstones rather than wasting precious time gawking at it. I'm just saying. I know he's sheriff and all, but I do hope he's put his courting time with your sister to better use since the last time you wrote. In the meantime, have I got a story for you? I don't have much time because I just got wind of the Star's next move, which is why I'm only writing one letter. So I am going to beg you to do me a favor and read this next part to Pearson as soon as you can. About a week ago, after chasing the stars north to Moab, I found myself half drowned on the banks of the Colorado River due to yet another instance of underestimating them. They led me straight into a pit of quicksand, and they once again ensured no real harm came to me by putting a tree branch well within my reach before taking off. After pulling myself and my horse to safety, I made the mistake of putting too much weight on the branch, which broke and sent me tumbling down a cliffside. Oh no. I was knocked unconscious in the process and fell into the depths of the Colorado. If it wasn't for Orion dragging me to shore and saving both our hides, I would have drowned for sure. I was in a pretty bad way for a few days. Thankfully, a fellow by the name of Bishop Peterson happened by on his way home to Spring City after a scouting trip. He found me at the fork where the Green River meets up with San Rafael and saved me from becoming buzzard meat. I was still senseless, having concussed myself, so he loaded me up on Orion, tied the reins to his pack horse, and carted us both back toward his home. I started to regain my senses somewhere along the old Spanish trail, and Peterson and I began getting to know each other. He's one of them Mormon leaders over in Spring City, which is why they call him Bishop. His first name is Lafayette. Before we got to be too good of friends, I decided to get it out of the way and ask him point blank if he was a polygamist. Spring City is well known for that. He said he was. and he has 2 wives and 8 children waiting for him at home. Then he asked what, as a lawman, I intended to do about it. As I was fully in his debt for saving my life, I told him I didn't intend to do anything about it. I was just curious. I couldn't blame him for being suspicious. Only last month I read an article about 2 men from Spring City being shut up in jail for 6 months while their 6 wives, they both had 3, and children were left to fend for themselves. My guess is the scouting trip Bishop Peterson was returning home from was to help him avoid the same fate. Anyway, after a few days on the trail, Lafayette got to telling me some stories about the Pavant UT Indians that used to live in the central Utah Territory. One of the tales he told me has been on my mind ever since, but on account of my brain being quite addled for a few days after arriving in Spring City, what he told me is only just starting to seem important. This is where Pearson comes in. Sam, remember when you asked what I knew about a woman named Maria Antonino de Rivera? Turns out she wasn't a woman at all. Juan Maria Antonio de Rivera was a Spanish explorer in the 1700s. I knew his name was familiar when you asked me. Well, I was right. In fact, his name was familiar because I've seen his inscription on a rock out in the West Desert between Riverdale and Deseret. Apparently, he went on 2 separate expeditions exploring the Colorado River and other canyon lands in 1765. His yearning to explore was first stirred up after he heard a tale from the marketplace down in Albuquerque about an Indian woman, a woman who paid for a horse bridle repair with a large piece of raw silver. He believed it was proof that the fabled land of Tecoyo existed. After gaining the governor's permission, de Rivera set out in search of Tecoyo and the mysterious bearded men that were believed to inhabit it. These bearded natives were said to live by a body of water in the Sevier Valley and to have access to inexhaustible quantities of pure silver. Well, after 2 expeditions in 1765, de Rivera ended up following the Spanish Trail and did eventually find the bearded men. They were none other than the Pavant UT Indians, who were known as one of the few native tribes to grow out their facial hair. But de Rivera never mentioned them having access to any enormous caches of silver. The Pavant lived in the Sevier Desert, on the banks of the Sevier Lake, which isn't too far north of present-day Frisco. Now, Lafayette said local legends differs from de Rivera's journals. Legend says de Rivera was shown a large silver deposit out in that desert, and after returning to Mexico for the second time in 1766, he mysteriously disappeared from record. He was never heard of again. At least he was never heard of again in Mexico. Lafayette said legend claims the Pavant Indians spoke of him often. They said he returned to their tribe shortly after his first visit and mined the silver deposit for a year or two until he'd acquired a significant treasure, which he hid in a cave nearby. Then he headed east. As you can probably guess, the legend also claims de Rivera created a map to his treasure, one that was most likely passed down through his family for generations until one of his descendants grew brave enough or adventurous enough to go on back for the treasure. I don't know for sure yet, but my gut is telling me this legend has something to do with Frisco and the stars, because the one thing I suspected from the start, and now know for certain, is the precious item the stars stole from our Captain Rigby is, in fact, a treasure map. Furthermore, I suspect the CJR on Oliver Snipes' notes to his wife may very well stand for Captain Jeremiah Rigby. The C is what threw me off because most people don't include Captain as part of their initials. But Captain Rigby seems just the sort to not want anyone to forget his status. Of course, I won't know for certain until Bill Pinkerton confirms that and a few other vital facts for me, but I'm pretty sure. And now that's all I've got to say to you, Pearson. Well, Lily, darling, aside from the peculiar plural marriage situation they have going on here in Spring City, I've never seen a prettier, friendlier town in all my life. It's largely been settled by Scandinavian Mormon families. Everything is laid out so nice and neat, with large parcels of land to each homestead. It's beautiful, even in November. In fact, Lafayette and I rode into town just a few days after All Hallows Eve, and you should have seen the leaves. Bright as pale gold they were, and just beginning to flutter to the ground. The sound was so quiet and peaceful, and they've got some fresh springs around here, which is where the city gets its name, of course. I've never tasted such sweet, clean water. I wish you could have seen it all. It's a far cry from the parched, wind-blown part of the territory Frisco is in. Think you'd really love it here. Now, back to the topic of courting you in person mentioned in your last letter. I'll make you a deal. When I get back to Frisco, I promise to court you good and proper for an entire week before carrying you off to find the preacher. A month if you insist. Which means you probably ought to get started on another wedding dress, because whether I've caught the stars or not, I aim to marry you before the seagull lilies start blooming again. Your loving, affianced Matthew.